raging rocks and shimmering shocks shall break the locks of heaven's gate.
But it was, as I look back on it, it was interesting for me because my initial intentions were really honorable. They were interpreted just the opposite way, but then it straightened out real quickly. But the amazing thing was when the neighbors, I think, finally noticed the park again. I think, frankly, it was in such bad condition that they might have been embarrassed, but I think part of it was that they were just sort of ignoring it.
The neighbors were victorious. We were really happy about it, but then we realized we had saved a raggedy old park, and we had all these people who were really red hot for Central Park, and we were all really realizing and seeing for the first time that there was potential in this park. So that's when the real work began.
Have fun. Have fun.
A warm midsummer's evening in Central Park. The Arts Guild players are ready for opening night of Shakespeare's play, A Midsummer's Night Dream. Like all of Shakespeare's comedies, the play's humor relies on the characters' confusion, deception, and misunderstanding to make us laugh at our own foibles and fancies, our only too human condition. But if all the world's a stage, then this really isn't the first play that's involved Central Park. Act 1 of that story finds the stage set in 1855, when John and Ann North create the first map of Northfield and declare this very spot a public square. Little did they know that this simple act would have so many and varied repercussions for Central Park, the city of Northfield, and even the Minnesota Supreme Court. When John and Ann North first platted Northfield, they designated one square block of land as a public square. The land, soon to become Central Park, was to be held in trust by the town of Northfield for public use. At the time, this meant for ornamentation and improvement as grounds of pleasure, amusement, recreation, or health. The square also served as the reference point for laying out all the streets of Northfield. In his survey of the new town, C.W. Iddings stated that he placed a good and sufficient stone at each of the 4 corners of the public square with which to make future surveys. Central Park literally became the cornerstone of Northfield. As our story unfolds, it's important to understand the relationship between Central Park and the area set aside for public schools. This 1869 map shows 2 empty square blocks side by side. To the east is the public square, Central Park. To the west is land reserved for public schools. However, it was not until 1874 that Northfield High School was constructed on the western block. The new school took up very little of the space, leaving students with lots of room for recreation and physical education. By this time, Central Park had been planted with trees, and the familiar diagonal walkways were established. Over time, other features were added, including a gazebo on the 4th Street side and a water fountain at the very center of the park. Central Park had become a peaceful place for picnics and summer band concerts. Meanwhile, in 1910, the high school burned down and was replaced with a much larger brick building. As Northfield grew, the school grew as well, and a south wing, including a new auditorium and gymnasium, were eventually added. By 1946, pressure was building to add more classroom space on the side of the block facing College Street. And that same year, a representative of the State Department of Education had admonished the school, saying that a satisfactory outdoor physical education space was very badly needed. With pressure on 2 fronts, the school superintendent looked across College Street and saw an answer to his problems. And so begins Act 2 of our play, The Fight Over Central Park. At the July 2, 1946 meeting of the Northfield City Council, Erling Johnson asked that the supervision and use of Central Park be turned over to the Board of Education. Also at that meeting was George Zandmiller, former mayor and president of the Northfield Improvement Association. Zandmiller suggested that the question was of such importance that it be put to the voters at a special election. Clearly, the Improvement Association was not in favor of the school board plan. It took over a year for the special election to be set for October 30th, 1947. In the months leading up to the election, both sides vigorously made their cases. As part of their case, the school board published a map of the park showing 37 trees to be removed. The opponents, now led by Leal Headley, a Carleton professor, member of the board of the Improvement Association, and neighbor of the park, published a different map that showed the intended use of the park by the school. The debate was heated, with both sides painting the other as misguided or misinformed. The results of the special referendum were clear. Of the 2,300 votes cast, a majority of 548 favored the school board proposal. Those opposed to the project were not ready to give up and had already begun to seek a temporary injunction to prevent the trees being cut down. The tree case, as the news began to describe it, had begun. One loud voice in favor of the project was Herman Rowe, publisher and editor of the News. In his weekly column, he stated that if the opponents resorted to court action, Northfield's slogan would have to be changed to "Cows, Colleges, and Contention," rather than contentment. He felt that the effort would prove fruitless, saying, "Why go to the expense of a court action, which it is safe to say will prove futile, and will result in a verdict that will be favorable to the city and the Board of Education?" It wasn't until June of 1948 that the case had been heard by a district judge who denied the restraining order. The plaintiffs were undaunted, and on July 3, 1948, now 2 years after the initial request, appealed the decision to the Minnesota Supreme Court. On January 20, 1949, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. Headley and his group had won the legal battle. In his report on the decision, Associate Justice Harry Peterson wrote, "Use of the public square for a playground or athletic field would be for a public use, but one not only different in kind from use as a public square, but positively inconsistent therewith, and destructive thereof, and consequently unlawful." Although this judgment seemed definitive, the city attorney, Robert Koch, was not ready to give up. He urged the city to condemn the park and take it over in spite of the Supreme Court decision. Matters came to a head at a city council meeting held in April of 1949. In what the Northfield News described as a violent council meeting and a verbal free-for-all, a minority of council urged their colleagues to abandon the fight and leave it up to the school board to pursue the case. Although the minority's view was rebuked by the rest of council, it seemed to take the steam out of the pro-condemnation forces. Although Koch pressed on, a permanent injunction against the city and the Board of Education was finally made in district court in June of 1950. The tree case was finally closed. Although Central Park remained intact, it began a 40-year period of gradual decline. This was due to two things: increased usage by high school and then middle school students, and the eventual demise of its main advocate, the Northfield Improvement Association. In 1952, the school board and city closed College Street and built an addition right up to the edge of the park. By 1990, when Charlie Kite, the new school superintendent, arrived on the scene, it was a sorry and potentially unsafe situation.
Really eroded. I can remember one spot in the southwest corner of the park that the ground was so eroded that a water pipe was above the ground. And the kids from the middle school used about 2/3 of the park for various kinds of FIAD activities, kickball, softball, that type of a thing. And as I began my work of trying to restore these schools and bring them back into a condition that people could be proud of, I turned my attention, I think it was probably in the early spring or the winter of 1991, to Central Park. And frankly, at that time, nobody cared, and I didn't know the history. And so I proposed that the school district invest a small amount of money, I think it was $15,000 at the time, to fix up the park. For me, because my initial intentions were really honorable. They were interpreted just the opposite way, but then it straightened out real quickly, and but the amazing thing was when the neighbors, I think, finally noticed the park again. I think, frankly, it was in such bad condition that nobody would, they might have been embarrassed, but I think part of it was that they were just sort of ignoring it. And once they got the idea that this could be a good center of the community again, and a lot of them, I think, didn't even know of the earlier controversy of 30, 40 years earlier, once they engaged, they were amazing. I was just really proud of the people that lived around this area. They put a lot into this.
And so the neighbors were victorious. We were really happy about it. But then we realized we had saved a raggedy old park. And we had all these people who were really red hot for Central Park. And we were all really realizing and seeing for the first time that there was potential in this park. So that's when the real work began. It was very exciting and all to be, you know, rah rah, let's save Central Park. But then it came around to, you know, deciding what we needed to do. So we decided that we were going to raise some money and we were going to turn the park around.
Citizens for Central Park led the restoration effort. They raised over $80,000 in cash and in-kind contributions from all parts of the community: the schools, the city, local businesses, service organizations, and literally hundreds of individuals who said yes to the new park plan. Created by local landscape architect Spencer Jones, the plan included many new trees, period lighting, walkways, flower beds, a restored stone circle with pavers in the middle, and new paved entrances to the park. In the spring of 1992, a celebration was held in the park to kick off the restoration process. Well, almost a decade has passed since the park restoration began. Today, neighbors of the park contribute their time to maintain the plantings and watch over the park. The community has found special ways to use it, including weddings, plays, and an annual craft fair. Our play has come to a happy conclusion. 146 years after John and Ann North created the public square, it is vibrant and vital, all due to the dedication and vision of specific individuals and to the community as a whole. Surely the Norths would be pleased to see their legacy intact. And, as the bard said, all's well that ends well. For the Northfield Community Video Project, I'm Paul Krause.
I went to, I believe it was A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was idyllic. It was idyllic until the mosquitoes came out, but it was an idyllic evening. The performers were having a great time. The stage was really a nice stage that was constructed, and I thought, boy, if I had even the tiniest piece to play in this, maybe even starting the controversy that kind of got people back together, it was all worth it.